The Nazi hypothermia experiments. During World War II, Nazi doctors conducted hypothermia experiments on concentration camp prisoners to study the effects of extreme cold and ways to re-warm victims. Subjects were stripped naked and immersed in ice water or left outside in freezing temperatures until near death. Researchers then tested different methods to warm them, including hot baths, heated blankets, and body-to-body contact. Many prisoners died from exposure or failed treatments. These experiments were performed without consent, aimed to help German soldiers survive cold climates, but inflicted immense suffering and death. Joseph Mengele's twins. In Auschwitz, Dr. Joseph Mengele, infamously called the Angel of Death, conducted brutal experiments on twins to explore genetic inheritance. He selected twins upon arrival, then subjected them to eye injections, forced organ transplants, and simultaneous vivisection. One child would be killed so the other could be dissected for comparison. No anesthesia, no consent, just raw, dehumanizing cruelty under the pretense of scientific study. Many died from infections, shock, or trauma. Mengele kept meticulous records but destroyed much of them while fleeing. His atrocities remain among the worst violations of medical ethics in history. Unit 731. In wartime Manchuria, Japan's Unit 731 operated as a covert biological and chemical warfare research center, using human beings, mostly Chinese civilians and prisoners of war, as test subjects. Victims were infected with anthrax, plague, and cholera to test germ warfare tactics. Some were dissected alive, called human vivisections, without anesthesia, to observe organ failure in real time. Limbs were amputated and reattached in unnatural position. Frostbite was tested by freezing limbs and smashing them with hammers. Over 3,000 people died in these experiments. After the war, many responsible received immunity in exchange for handing over their data to U.S. intelligence. Willowbrook State School Hepatitis Study. Between the 1950s and 1970s, Willowbrook State School in New York housed children with intellectual disabilities who were intentionally infected with hepatitis virus to study the disease's progression and test vaccine. Parents were often coerced into consenting under the false promise that their children would receive better care. The infected children suffered severe liver damage, and many experienced long-term health problems. The experiments prioritized scientific data over the children's welfare and consent. This study raised serious ethical questions about research on vulnerable populations and the exploitation of institutionalized individuals. The Chimera. Deep within the Soviet secret police system, the Chimera, or Laboratory 1, was a covert poison research facility tasked with developing undetectable toxins for assassinations. Prisoners, dissidents, and political enemies were given poisons like mustard gas derivatives, curare, ricin, and a chemical known as C2 to observe effects on the human body. Victims experienced paralysis, bleeding, vomiting, or sudden death. Scientists meticulously recorded symptoms and survival time. One goal was to create poisons that mimicked natural causes like heart attacks or strokes. The experiments were conducted without consent and often ended fatally, hidden behind state secrecy for decades. Guatemalan Syphilis Study. Between 1946 and 1948, U.S. government researchers deliberately infected over 1,300 Guatemalan people with syphilis, gonorrhea, and chancroid without their knowledge or consent. Prisoners, soldiers, mental health patients, and orphans were targeted. Sex workers who were already infected were instructed to have contact with inmates, or researchers applied bacteria directly to wounds and genitals. Many subjects were never treated, and the long-term health effects were ignored. The study aimed to test the effectiveness of penicillin, but instead violated every principle of ethical research. The experiment remained secret until 2010, when it was exposed and officially condemned by the U.S. government. Holmesburg Prison Experiments. From the 1950s to the 1970s, Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia became a laboratory where inmates were used for dermatological and pharmaceutical experiments. Under the direction of Dr. Albert Kligman, prisoners, mostly black men, were exposed to radioactive isotopes, dioxins, a toxic compound in Agent Orange, and industrial chemicals. Some had their skin deliberately burned or blistered to test healing agents. Others were given injections without knowing the full risk. Inmates were paid small sums, but there was no true informed consent. The facility operated like a human petri dish, where medical companies bypassed regulations by exploiting the incarcerated. Vipholm study. In Sweden during the 1940s and 1950s, researchers conducted the Vipholm study at a state institution for people with intellectual disabilities. The aim? Determine whether sugar caused tooth decay. Without consent, patients were fed excessive amounts of sugary foods like caramel, toffee, and chocolate, up to 24 pieces a day. The result was extreme dental damage, infections, and pain. Researchers observed cavity formation over time without offering preventative care. Though the study confirmed sugar's role in dental decay, it sparked ethical outrage. Subjects were treated as test objects, not human beings, in what is now considered a national scandal in Swedish medical history. The monster study. In 1939, at the University of Iowa, researchers led by Wendell Johnson conducted a stuttering experiment on 22 orphan children. Half received positive speech therapy. The other half were subjected to harsh criticism, ridicule, and constant correction to induce speech problems. The children in the negative group were told they stuttered, even though they didn't. Many developed lifelong anxiety, low self-esteem, and persistent speech issues. The goal was to explore the causes of stuttering, but the method inflicted psychological trauma without consent. Because of its unethical design, the project remained hidden for decades and was later labeled the Monster Study. Project 4.1. After the U.S. detonated a hydrogen bomb near the Marshall Islands in 1954, radioactive fallout drifted over inhabited atolls like Rongelap and Utrecht. Instead of evacuating residents immediately, the U.S. launched Project 4.1 to study the effects of radiation exposure on humans. Islanders, including children, suffered burns, hair loss, thyroid disorders, and long-term cancer risks. Many were used as test subjects without informed consent. Researchers monitored them for decades, collecting biological data while providing only partial or delayed medical care. The experiment exploited an unsuspecting population under the guise of humanitarian aid and scientific necessity. Human vivisections. In multiple instances throughout history, most infamously by Unit 731 and Nazi doctors, vivisection, or the dissection of living human beings without anesthesia, was used as a method of medical experimentation. Victims were cut open to observe internal organs during disease progression or trauma. Some were infected with pathogens like plague or syphilis and then dissected alive to trace tissue damage. Others had limbs amputated or organs removed while conscious. No anesthesia was given to preserve accuracy in physiological response. These practices offered no therapeutic benefit, only data extracted through pain and death. Vivisection remains one of history's most grotesque scientific violations.
King Leopold II of Belgium. He never set foot in the Congo, but his orders killed millions. King Leopold II ruled Belgium from 1865 to 1909, but his most notorious actions came from his private ownership of the Congo Free State. Under the guise of philanthropy, Leopold instituted a brutal forced labor regime to extract rubber and ivory. Villagers who failed quotas were mutilated. Hands were chopped off as warnings. Mass starvation, disease, and murder led to the deaths of an estimated 10 million Congolese. Unlike many kings who ruled by direct conquest, Leopold operated through a corporate front, masking genocide behind paperwork and diplomacy. Ivan IV of Russia. He turned paranoia into state policy. Ivan IV, known as Ivan the Terrible, ruled as Russia's first Tsar from 1547 to 1584. His reign began with reforms, but quickly descended into cruelty. After the death of his beloved wife, Ivan launched the Oprichnina, a reign of terror where secret police slaughtered entire towns suspected of disloyalty. He executed nobles without trial, tortured advisors, and even killed his own son in a fit of rage. Entire regions, like Novgorod, were depopulated. Ivan's obsession with control created a legacy of fear that shaped Russia's autocratic politics for centuries. Emperor Nero of Rome. He ruled with excess, silenced dissent with murder, and watched his city burn. Nero, Emperor of Rome from 54 to 68 CE, became infamous for tyranny, debauchery, and violence. When a massive fire consumed Rome in 64 CE, many believed Nero started it to clear land for his grand palace, the Domus Aurea. He blamed Christians, initiating one of history's earliest recorded persecutions. Nero executed his own mother, stepbrother, and wife. His cruelty extended to artistic delusions. Citizens were forced to attend his endless performances under threat of death. His rule ended in rebellion and suicide, but not before destabilizing the empire. King John of England. He taxed his people into ruin and crushed dissent with iron law. King John ruled England from 1199 to 1216, and is often remembered as the monarch who was forced to sign the Magna Carta, but his infamy runs deeper. He extorted the nobility, sold legal judgments to the highest bidder, and imposed unbearable taxes to fund failed wars in France. He allegedly starved his own nephew, Arthur, to death in prison to eliminate a rival claim to the throne. His military incompetence led to the loss of Normandy and other territories. John's cruelty and mismanagement triggered a rebellion so severe that it reshaped English law. King Richard II of England. His ineffective rule and favoritism sparked rebellion and ended in his downfall. Richard II reigned from 1377 to 1399, inheriting the throne as a child. His reign was marked by political mismanagement, heavy taxation, and favoritism towards select courtiers, alienating powerful nobles. His harsh suppression of the peasants' revolt in 1381 demonstrated ruthless control but failed to address deeper social issues. Richard's arbitrary decisions and autocratic style led to growing opposition. Eventually, Henry Bolingbroke, a cousin, invaded England, deposed Richard, and took the throne as Henry IV. Richard was imprisoned and died under mysterious circumstances, likely murdered, ending the Plantagenet line. Vlad III of Wallachia. He ruled through terror, impaling thousands to instill fear. Vlad III, known as Vlad the Impaler, ruled Wallachia, part of modern-day Romania, during the mid-15th century. While later romanticized as the inspiration for Dracula, Vlad's real legacy is soaked in blood. He earned his title by impaling enemies, rebels, and even suspected traitors on massive wooden stakes. In 1462, he reportedly impaled over 20,000 Ottoman prisoners outside Targoviste to deter invasion. Entire villages were massacred for minor offenses. Though some viewed him as a patriot who resisted Ottoman domination, his reign was defined by sadistic violence and indiscriminate brutality. Caligula, Rome's mad emperor. He treated the empire like a personal playground of cruelty and chaos. Caligula, emperor of Rome from 37 to 41 CE, began his rule with promise, but quickly descended into madness and sadism. He demanded to be worshipped as a living god, appointed his horse as a priest, and possibly a consul, and executed anyone who displeased him, including close allies and family members. His reign was marked by public humiliation of senators, arbitrary killings, and senseless extravagance. Caligula once ordered soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war after a failed invasion of Britain. His cruelty and instability led to his assassination by his own guards. Emperor Hirohito of Japan. He presided over an empire soaked in blood, yet never faced judgment. Emperor Hirohito reigned from 1926 to 1989, overseeing Japan's aggressive expansion and atrocities during World War II. While his exact role remains debated, Hirohito authorized military campaigns that resulted in the deaths of millions. Under his reign, the imperial army committed the rape of Nanking, where an estimated 300,000 civilians were slaughtered. Biological warfare, human experimentation by Unit 731, and mass executions occurred across Asia. Despite this, Hirohito was never tried after the war. Allied powers, valuing political stability, allowed him to remain on the throne, shielding him from prosecution. King Herod the Great. He modernized Judea while ruthlessly eliminating anyone who challenged him. King Herod ruled Judea as a client king under Rome from 37 to 4 BCE. Celebrated for grand architectural projects like the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, Herod's cruelty overshadowed his achievements. He executed his wife Mariamne, her mother, and 3 of his sons, fearing plots against his rule. According to the Gospel of Matthew, he ordered the massacre of the innocents, the killing of all male infants in Bethlehem, to eliminate a prophesied rival. Though debated by historians, the account aligns with Herod's documented pattern of violent paranoia and political purging. King Richard III of England. He gained power through suspicion and likely murdered royal children to keep it. Richard III ruled England from 1483 to 1485 and remains one of the most controversial monarchs in British history. After the death of his brother, King Edward IV, Richard took custody of his young nephews, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, both rightful heirs. The 2 princes were lodged in the Tower of London and never seen again. Most historians believe Richard ordered their deaths to secure the throne. He also crushed dissent ruthlessly, seizing lands from rivals and executing opponents. His brief reign ended at the Battle of Bosworth Field, where he was killed and the Tudor dynasty began. Genghis Khan. He forged the largest contiguous empire through unparalleled brutality and strategy. Genghis Khan, born Temujin in the 12th century, united Mongol tribes and led a campaign of conquest across Asia and into Europe. His armies were notorious for mass slaughter. Entire cities were razed and populations massacred if they resisted. Khan used psychological terror, such as spreading rumors of his mercilessness, to prompt surrender without battle. His military tactics combined speed, mobility, and coordination, overwhelming enemies who underestimated the Mongol cavalry. Despite his savage methods, he established a code of laws and promoted trade, but his legacy remains inseparable from the scale of destruction his conquests caused. Tamerlane, Timur. He carved out a vast empire through devastating military campaigns marked by extreme brutality. Tamerlane, ruling in the late 14th and early 15th centuries, sought to restore the Mongol Empire's glory, but governed with unmatched cruelty. His conquests spanned Persia, Mesopotamia, parts of India, and Russia. Cities that resisted were destroyed, and survivors often slaughtered or enslaved. Tamerlane famously built towers of skulls from his victims as warnings to others. His campaigns resulted in millions of deaths and widespread destruction. Despite his violent methods, he promoted arts and architecture in his capital, Samarkand, but his legacy is largely defined by terror and mass slaughter. Wu Zetian. Wu Zetian began as a low-ranking concubine in Tang Dynasty China, but rose to become the only female emperor in Chinese history. Her ascent was marked by extreme political maneuvering. She systematically eliminated rivals, including a former empress, though the well-known story that she murdered her own infant daughter to frame a rival is now widely considered to be a piece of historical propaganda spread by her enemies. Once in power, she purged opposition through a ruthless secret police network, leading to the execution or forced suicide of hundreds of officials and rivals. She replaced members of the royal family with her own relatives and ruled with absolute authority, transforming the Tang court into her personal instrument of control. Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory, a 16th-century Hungarian noblewoman, is infamous for allegedly torturing and murdering hundreds of young girls over several years. According to court testimonies, her cruelty included beating, mutilating, and starving her victims. The popular legend that she believed bathing in their blood would preserve her youth and beauty emerged centuries later and is not supported by contemporary evidence. Protected by her noble status, her crimes went unchecked until servants escaped and reported her. She was eventually confined to her castle under house arrest until her death, but was never formally tried or convicted. Queen Ranavalona. I ruled Madagascar from 1828 to 1861, with a reign so brutal it had a devastating impact on her kingdom. She reversed her husband's pro-European policies and imposed extreme isolationism. She banned Christianity, executing or enslaving converts. Thousands were killed through the Tangina ordeal, a poisonous trial by combat where innocence was proven by vomiting, a method she used liberally against suspected traitors. Forced labor projects and frequent warfare also contributed to a significant decline in the population, with some historians estimating that her policies led to the deaths of as many as 1 to 2 million people through violence, disease, and persecution. Irene of Athens. Irene of Athens ruled the Byzantine Empire as regent and then as emperor in the late 8th century. She gained power by having her own son, Emperor Constantine VI, blinded and exiled, a brutal act that ensured her sole rule. This made her the first woman to officially hold the title of Emperor of the Byzantine Empire. Irene was a devout supporter of the veneration of icons, and she suppressed religious opposition with harsh punishments for dissenters. Her reign was marked by intense political intrigue, a ruthless consolidation of power, and significant instability within the empire, as rivals continuously challenged her authority. Queen Mary, I of England. Mary I earned the nickname Bloody Mary for her relentless persecution of Protestants during her short reign from 1553 to 1558. A devout Catholic, she sought to reverse the English Reformation initiated by her father, Henry VIII. She reinstated Roman Catholicism as the state religion and launched a campaign of religious cleansing. Nearly 300 Protestants were burned at the stake for heresy, including prominent scholars and clergymen. Her regime also imprisoned hundreds more, with many dying from disease and neglect. These public executions were intended to terrify and left England deeply divided, ensuring her legacy would be one of fear and religious fanaticism. Queen Catherine de' Medici. Catherine de' Medici wielded immense political power in 16th-century France as queen consort, then regent for her sons. Though a skilled stateswoman, her legacy is haunted by the saint, Bartholomew's Day massacre of 1572. In an effort to suppress the growing power of the Protestant Huguenots, she approved a plan for a targeted assassination of their leaders. This plot quickly spiraled into a nationwide slaughter in which over 10,000 Protestants were murdered in their homes and in the streets. While the extent of her direct responsibility for the wider massacre is debated by historians, Catherine's use of fear and political manipulation plunged France deeper into its bloody wars of religion. Queen Olga of Kiev. After her husband, Prince Igor of Kiev, was murdered by the Drevlians in 945 CE, Queen Olga launched a systematic campaign of vengeance. According to the primary chronicle, she lured Drevlian envoys under the pretense of peace, only to have them buried alive. A second delegation was burned alive in a bathhouse. She then traveled to their city and organized a false funeral feast, where her soldiers slaughtered 5,000 attendees. Not yet satisfied, she later laid siege to the Drevlian capital and burned it to the ground using flaming birds. Olga's brutal reprisals established her authority and solidified her rule. Fredegund was a queen consort of the Merovingian kingdom in the late 6th century, notorious for her ruthless ambition and violence. According to contemporary sources, she orchestrated numerous assassinations and poisonings to eliminate rivals, including members of her own family. Her most infamous act was ordering the murder of King Chilperic I's wife and her children to secure her own son's position. Fredegund led brutal wars against rival factions, often resorting to treachery and cruelty. Her reign was marked by relentless scheming and bloodshed, embodying the chaotic and violent nature of early medieval Frankish politics. Queen Isabella the Reine of Castile. Isabella I, who ruled jointly with Ferdinand of Aragon, played a central role in formalizing and expanding the Spanish Inquisition in 1478. Her goal was religious uniformity in Spain, primarily targeting Jews and Muslims. She ordered the expulsion of over 100,000 Jews in 1492, forcing them to convert or flee. The Inquisition used torture to extract confessions and executed thousands suspected of heresy. Property was confiscated, families were destroyed, and a climate of fear was entrenched in daily life. Isabella's support of the Inquisition institutionalized religious persecution and established one of the most infamous judicial systems in history. Queen Elizabeth I of England. Elizabeth I ruled England from 1558 to 1603 and is often celebrated for stability and cultural flourishing, but her reign was also marked by harsh repression. She authorized the torture and execution of Catholic priests and sympathizers, branding them as traitors. Over 180 Catholics were publicly executed, often by being hanged, drawn, and quartered. Her sophisticated spy network, led by Francis Walsingham, uncovered and dismantled conspiracies with ruthless efficiency. She sanctioned the execution of her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, to eliminate a Catholic rival. While Elizabeth maintained a careful image of mercy, her statecraft was built on surveillance, coercion, and the strategic use of death. Empress Dowager Cixi. Empress Dowager Cixi ruled China from behind the throne for nearly 5 decades during the Qing dynasty, manipulating emperors and purging rivals. She seized power by placing her young son on the throne, then imprisoned opponents, including the emperor's widow and advisors. Later, she orchestrated a coup against her adopted son, the Guangxu emperor, when he attempted to introduce reform, placing him under house arrest. While the exact cause of his death remains debated, many historians believe Cixi was responsible for poisoning him. Cixi suppressed modernization efforts and backed the anti-foreigner Boxer Rebellion, which led to international invasion and chaos. Her rule was marked by paranoia, repression, and political stagnation. Queen Athaliah of Judah. Athaliah seized the throne of Judah around 841 BCE through a massacre. After her son, King Ahaziah, was killed, she ordered the execution of every member of the royal family, her own grandchildren included, to eliminate any claimants to power. According to the biblical account, only one infant, Joash, survived in hiding. Athaliah ruled for 6 years, promoting Baal worship and suppressing the traditional priesthood. Her regime was marked by tyranny and religious upheaval. Eventually, a revolt led by the high priest overthrew her, and she was executed by sword. Athaliah remains one of the Bible's most ruthless female rulers, infamous for murdering her own bloodline.